Hi, this is Carl Palachuk. Welcome to another SMB Community Podcast. I'm joined today by my good friend, Chip Reaves. How are you, sir?
Hey, Carl. I'm great. How are you?
Pretty good. So it's February. Are you covered in snow?
No, we're in the Southeast. We're covered in rain.
Okay, you're covered in rain. Well, Sacramento, we're covered in rain too. I thought you guys got some snow. You don't get snow?
No, not where we get like one day a year, and it usually melts off in a day.
Okay, good. Well, it is fun to watch other people suffer on Facebook, but, you know, I'm glad I'm not traveling there yet. So I don't go north until March, so it's all good.
Yeah, I made the mistake of booking one business event in Boston in February one year. Not going to do that again.
Yeah, I was in New York a couple years ago. I was like, okay, yeah, I don't have to do that anymore. So anyway, so Chip is with Bigger Brains, and he has a long history of providing IT services, managed services, and in fact, franchised IT services. And he started a training organization called Bigger Brains. And so I have him in from time to time to talk about what's new and where we're going. And he's got a slightly different view on our industry than many, many people who are either delivering services strictly over here or trying to sell something to MSPs over here. So what else would you like to add about Bigger Brains and your current adventures?
Well, I think you said it pretty good. We're mostly a training company. We are venturing a little bit into app development, but that's kind of a new thing. We'll see where that goes. But yeah, it's we're kind of created to answer the question that I used to get all the time when I was an MSP or a VAR or whatever we called ourselves at the time. You know, I've been doing this since '89, and we've had a lot of different names. But you know, you always get those customers who ask for help. In fact, I used to own an MSP here in South Carolina, and we still share offices. And I was passing through the office yesterday on my way to get the mail, and there was a customer up front. It was an older gentleman who I didn't catch all the conversation, but he was basically asking for, is there some kind of book I can buy? Is there some kind of resource I can get to teach me how to use all this stuff? And in theory, my MSP up front is supposed to be selling my training, but the tech who was there at the time was like, well, I guess you could go online or something. I said, well, no, you could also get Bigger Brains. That's what we're here for, is to provide online training to help answer all those questions that customers have always been asking. And I, like a lot of MSPs over the years, I've tried things like the classroom training. You know, when we built out one of our locations, we actually had a classroom area set aside, and we tried to schedule classes and basic PC type stuff and some basic Microsoft Excel type classes. And we never got enough participation to make it worthwhile. But when online training came along, and you can access it anytime, anywhere, and it's easy enough for your grandmother to use, that just makes a lot more sense. So we built Bigger Brains as a solution for other MSPs to use in that situation. So when the customer asks the question, how do I use this? Or when you have a situation with a customer who's tearing up your help desk line by asking all the questions about how do I print, how do I do a mail merge, how do I whatever, that you've got an easy resource to say, hey, here's a solution. It'll make you happier. It'll make me happier. Go do this.
Right. So this is end user focused training, most of it anyway. And MSPs, basically, they buy these classes from you and resell them to their clients or bundle them into their cloud service offering or whatever offering they have. And they just simply include that in the offering that they make, correct?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So the pricing starts around 10 cents per user a month. It goes, the most you'll pay in small volumes is about $4 a user a month. So it's designed to be very low cost, but you get all 100 courses. So you get, everything on Microsoft Excel and Office 365 and QuickBooks and some sales and marketing stuff. So we wanted to make it kind of a no-brainer for MSPs to include as part of their service plans. And knock on wood, so far it's working out pretty well.
So, and with things like Excel, it makes perfect sense that if I've got a user with 25 employees, they need 10 of them to go through the Excel training. They need another 15 to go through Microsoft Word. That's all cool. But what about other apps? Like how many people actually take a class on QuickBooks or on Microsoft Access or something like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when we run our reports and we generate, not so much for the MSP side of the business. So we got started as an MSP focused business, and then we started working with other training companies who also wanted to sell our content. And what we do with them, most of them are doing things like leadership training and management training, compliance training, things like that, and they're bundling our stuff with it. And so what I do is every quarter I prepare a report for them on what's selling well and what's being used the most, because a lot of them don't really understand the technology side of things. And most of what we do is technology training, mostly around Microsoft Office and apps. And so I prepare a report. I'm working on that report right now for Q4 on what's been used the most. And you know, a lot of them are what you expect. Excel is always in the top list. That's always high up on the list. Windows 10, always high on the list. Lately, we started to see a good bit of interest in some of the, they're not quite soft skills, but I call them productivity courses, like how to manage your email, time management, how to organize your files, how to stay safe online, you know, those kind of things.
So those aren't product specific, but they're behaviors of success.
Right. You know, helping people, you know, not how to use a specific tool, but how to be productive with whatever tool you use, basically. And those are doing well. Access never makes it into the top of the list. QuickBooks never makes it into the top of the list, but they do get good reviews. I mean, if you think about it, it makes sense, right? Because most companies, you know, you can have 100 employees. There's probably only one or two that use QuickBooks. You know, it's not as much as Intuit would love it to be otherwise. It's not that pervasive.
Right. So, and what's the format? Because I think a lot of folks expect this to be the generic online training where there's a unembodied voice saying, and now go to the file menu. And so you have a different approach to that.
We do. And it's funny, when I got started, that's what I expected to do originally. This is going back to 2011 when we were kind of laying the groundwork for this. At the time, in 2011, I was the CEO of Computer Troubleshooters. We were an IT franchise. So we had about 400 locations, and we had built an online training platform to train our franchisees. And we were training them on QuickBooks, but also on like, you know, how to sell managed services and the kind of stuff that you do. And so the idea was basically, if we take that same platform and kind of spin it around and offer it to our customers and fill it with topics that they would want, you know, that we were going to do that. But I had no intention of creating courses. I figured, you know, why reinvent the wheel? Somebody out there has made a QuickBooks course. Somebody out there has made an Excel course. All I have to do is find it, you know, buy in bulk to get a price low enough to fit it with a managed service plan, and, you know, the rest will be easy. And we held focus groups at the beginning of 2012. I remember this really clearly. It was my first MSP here in South Carolina. We had a large open room, and so I had these people come in, and they were fellow MSPs, and they were business professionals, and they were educators, and comedians. There was a group of comedians from Greenville who you've met, and we looked at training from about 20 different vendors with the goal of picking the ones that we liked. And the feedback after 2 days of doing this from the group was, we don't like any of these. They're boring. They're hard to follow. You know, some are too fast, some are too slow. You know, they're not interesting. You know, there was just not a lot of good feedback from the group. So we kind of took a step back and said, okay, what do we do? You know, if we're going to create content, how do we avoid creating content like that, you know, that everybody's going to not like? And so we kind of went back to school and did a lot of research into how people learn and what we find interesting, and you know, why classroom training is considered more interesting than online training. Especially back at the time, this was a big deal, because when I talked to training professionals and I said, we're trying to create online training that isn't boring, it was like I was saying, we're trying to create water that isn't wet. They were just like, well, that doesn't make any, online's always going to be boring. It doesn't make sense what you're saying. But we came up with a format after doing some research and a couple trial runs of what we call the teacher-learner format, which is taking the best of the classroom, but putting it into a canned video format. So it's all video-based, it's all filmed in a TV studio, It's all filmed with multiple cameras, so we can cut between cameras. And the key for us is it's filmed with multiple people on camera. Particularly, we always have 2 people on camera generally, sometimes more, but generally 2, what we call the teacher and the learner. So you're not just listening to a lecture, you're watching somebody else learn. And it's like being in a classroom with somebody else. And that's not just for appearances, there's also biological reasons. If you're in a classroom and you're learning something along with everybody else, and the teacher asks a question, you're afraid of being called on, so your brain immediately tries to think of the answer. And the same actually happens if one of your classmates asks a question of the teacher, your brain kind of tries to figure out the answer too. And it's that trying to think of the answer that helps to lock that knowledge in, for long-term retention and for better memory efficacy. And so we do the same thing on the video. So we have 2 people, the teacher is teaching the learner, you, the at-home audience, are kind of participating too, but every time the teacher asks the learner a question, every time the learner asks the teacher a question, it's an opportunity to not only make it more interesting, but also make that information lock in a little better. And having 2 people gives us opportunities for humor. We can tell some jokes. We can have more scenario type situations where the learner can say, well, what about in this situation? I need to make this kind of database. What would you do in that situation? And it really just helps to make the training more relevant. So that's the format we came up with in 2012. We tweaked it a little bit along the way, and 90% of our courses are in that format today. A couple of others are in some different formats we've tried, still kind of similar, almost always 2 people on camera. Sometimes it's more of a TV co-host kind of a format, but most of them are in that teacher-learner format.
And how many courses are there altogether?
That's a good question. There's 150 on my list, but quite a few of those are still in production. So there's about 110 to 112 in the library right now.
And so what do you do with, we're in an ever-changing world. Like, what do you do when Microsoft comes out with a new thing and everybody's like, what is that and how do I use it? I mean, do you guys jump on it right away, or do you wait and see whether it's going to stick around a while?
It's funny you should mention that, because I don't teach a lot of courses, but I teach the Office 365 course myself, and I'm still a Microsoft partner, so I get all of the partner newsletters, I get all the Yammer updates, I get all of the stuff that comes out, and every time they release something new, I have we actually use Microsoft Teams now, so if it looks interesting, if it looks relevant, I'll cut and paste it into my Microsoft Teams channel where I'm storing this stuff. And if we jumped on everything right away, we would go crazy, because every day there's something new. But we do update the Office 365 course twice a year, and we don't necessarily include every new feature in the updates, but the core stuff we're going to include. Like Microsoft's had a lot of stuff like bookings and shifts that they added to Teams, and a couple of other things they had added that I don't even remember the names now. Some of them don't even make it, some of them don't last long enough to make it to the time we film the update.
Well, that's the thing, is Microsoft will announce something and everybody says, oh, it's the greatest thing in, in the history of the world. And then 6 months later, it's just gone. It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, and honestly, I've been totally surprised that hasn't happened with Microsoft Sway as yet. I have yet to meet anybody who's found a productive use for Microsoft Sway. And because of that, our Microsoft Sway course is now pretty dated. I've got to make a new one this year. So if anybody has any good use cases for Microsoft Sway, please let me know, because I've got to film that one this year.
Do you think most people have ever heard of Microsoft Sway?
Yeah, I think IT folks have, because the icon pops up and somebody asks them about it. But even when we did it the first time, we have a lady that she's fantastic. She is a professional presentation trainer. Like, she trains people how to do presentations. Oh. And so she taught our PowerPoint courses, and she also teaches a really cool course called Power Up PowerPoint, which is not about how to use the tool, but it's like how to make it interesting, how to use games and how to create your images the right way and all that sort of thing. It's a really popular course. And she does that. She actually did that for computer troubleshooters. That's how I met her, and she was one of the first ones I brought on board. And so I got her to do the Microsoft Sway course. And here we are. I think it's 3 years since we did the first course, and I've gone back to her and said, "Hey, do you want to teach this again? Have you used it much?" And she hasn't touched it since she filmed the course with us 3 years ago. So I don't know what Sway's doing, but it's still there.
Right. So I have an odd sort of question, which is, today, so we're recording this early 2019, the economy is going gangbusters, and technicians are fully employed, right? No, we're having to steal technicians from each other in order to populate our own tech support. And companies seem to be doing well. So how does that affect you? Are people buying more training, or are they saying, hey, I don't have to train my people because I can retain them without that? Or, does it have any effect on you?
It's a really good question. And actually, I had a meeting earlier today about it was a CEO projections report of kind of looking at where the economy is going, because we started Bigger Brains in 2012, right? So we've been on an upswing ever since. We haven't been through a recession yet. Now, we did this with computer troubleshooters, and I've got some feedback on that, pro and con. But the general assumption is that training does well either way, because in a downsizing environment, people have to cross-train to do the work that would be done by others. In an environment like we are today, where we're labor constrained, right, where there's not enough people to fill the jobs that are out there, you need to hire people who may not have all the skills you want and then try to upskill them to where they need to be. So training, in theory, works both ways. I haven't actually lived that part yet, so it's inevitable it'll happen sometime in the next few years. So I'll let you know in a few years how that goes, but that's the assumption.
Right. So then what about ways that MSPs can use this? Because what comes to mind for me, talking about, the whole onboarding and education and all that, is I love helping my clients improve their onboarding process, because it means they engage me earlier. I create the username and password before the employee shows up, and I create their logon for their CRM and for QuickBooks if they need it, and the bank accounts and, Microsoft Office and so forth and so on. And it seems to me like I could then say, now the next thing I want to do to help you improve your employee onboarding process is training, right? Pick these 5 classes and schedule your employees to take them, in the first month that they are employed. That seems like it would be an easy thing for me to provide at very little cost.
Yeah, and I would even go further and say that a lot of the onboarding process that you're talking about, especially if it's things that you're helping them with, and especially if it's things that are showing the new employee the ropes of the IT infrastructure that you have presumably helped to create and certainly helped to maintain. It's not that hard to create some sort of training class. So if an organization has a CRM, if they have a time clock system, if they have a Office 365, if they have some line of business applications, it's not too hard to just sit down, use a screen recording software like Camtasia, or there's a free one we use now called OBS Studio. On the Mac, there's one called ScreenFlow that I like a lot. And just, even if it's just as simple as, recording 15 minutes of you kind of walking through the necessary screens, you can take that, and in a large organization, let's say 500 employees, 1,000 employees, they're going to have a learning management system, and that's a software platform. Today, it's usually cloud-based. It didn't used to be, like everything else. And you could load that video you just made into their LMS. Well, small businesses don't have that, but with Bigger Brains, that's essentially what we're offering is an LMS. So you, Carl Palachuk, or Joe's Tech Consulting, could create your own set of onboarding videos, if the client's large enough to justify it, and if you can get them to justify paying you to do it, and actually create a custom course and load it into their Bigger Brains, so all their employees can access that course without having to tie you up to come in and teach the new employees, or without just going by a written guide or something like that.
So would I, as an MSP, say create these modules, and for a particular client say, all right, when you hire somebody into sales, they take these series of classes, and when you hire somebody into customer service, they take these series of classes, and there's a way for me to track that, or for the employer to track that?
Oh yeah. The neat thing about Bigger Brains, we really don't talk about this very much, and to be honest, it rarely gets used, but the foundation of Bigger Brains is a piece of software called Littmos. And this is the same learning platform that I used to use with computer troubleshooters. It's a very popular learning platform, got bought by SAP last year, so we'll kind of see what happens with it now. But if you were a small business and you wanted to buy your own instance of Littmos, minimum buy-in is $750 a month. With Bigger Brains, you're actually getting all of the Littmos platform, plus it's preloaded with all of our courses. So you can, through our platform, you or your client, because let's say your client, if it's a certain size, they're going to have a manager, they may have an HR manager, they may have a training manager. They'll want to run their own reports. They'll want to assign courses. They may want to create their own users. All of that is handled inside the Bigger Brains interface. But the nice golden handcuff part for us is if they're on board with you creating some onboarding courses for them, then it's your face, it's your training that the new employees are going to see. It's also something that in a perfect world, they would be paying you to update periodically because everything changes periodically. And that's something they wouldn't have with anybody else. It's a great upsell, it's a great differentiator, it's a great new line of revenue, both in terms of presumably them paying you to create the courses, either as a one-off or as part of a service plan. In addition to being able to assign out of the Bigger Brains library. So we have 100 courses, and yeah, there's a lot of them in there that are good. Are there some that could be used for onboarding? Yeah, it depends on the role. Office 365, certainly if it's an Office 365 environment, Gmail if it's not, QuickBooks for certain people, HIPAA for certain environments, things like that. And then there's some other courses that are going to be more either role determinant, meaning that maybe it's one person who wants to grow into a management role, and as part of their annual review, they say, what can I do to be ready for this promotion? And their manager could say, well, here's 3 courses from Bigger Brains. Go take the new manager starter kit, go take Power Up PowerPoint, and go take effective communication. And if you've taken all those and completed all those by your next review, then there'll be a raise, there'll be a promotion, however you want to do it. So all of those are possibilities. We kind of mix and match and have the best of both worlds, the pre-made canned stuff from Bigger Brains and whatever custom courses that the MSP or the MSP's client wants to create.
And most people haven't taken advantage of that. So they could, they just haven't.
Yeah, on the MSP side, very few. And I think that's kind of true in general. I mean, I was an MSP for 20-something years. I mean, I know how it is. You don't have time to get into every new activity that comes along. But it's an option out there, or it's also an option if you have clients that are looking, because what we do see more and more, it used to be that in order to have a learning platform, you were probably a 500-seat business, and then it was a 300-seat business. Now it's 100, and so it's coming down, and so we're starting to see more smaller businesses who want to have that sort of platform, but who don't necessarily want to invest, $1,000 a month in one of the main names out there. If they can get Bigger Brains as part of their, service plan with America's Tech Support or whoever, then all the more better, and it's a great selling point for you as well.
So yeah, I always think about what can I put into my cloud bundle, right? And when I look at it and I say, so if I'm buying this in bulk, I can add 5 licenses for all the training people could possibly want for 50 cents a month. Like that costs me essentially nothing. and I could easily roll that in, and then it becomes another bullet point on my offering where I say, look, this bundle includes da-da-da-da-da, and you could easily make the argument that education, unlimited education for your clients is easily worth an extra $100, per user per month or something like that. I mean, you could really say there's tremendous value there if you're going to use it. So I think it's a great opportunity. So you have a new thing. You mentioned apps. Talk to me about BrainBot. Is this a robot taking over my world? Is that what's going on?
It is. I even have get courtesy of Northern Kentucky Tech Center, a friend of mine who has a MSP business and a 3D printing business. He sent me a 3D BrainBot.
Nice.
Actually a 2-piece, but I can't really hold up both pieces. Yeah. So for me, my background is in IT and the MSP channel, and I'm still learning the whole learning market. I'm learning, HR and training, and I've been going to training conferences. And I went to one at the end of 2017, and there was a guy named Dr. Art Khan, K-O-H-N. You can find his videos on YouTube, who is a neuroscientist. He's worked for Google. He's worked for a lot of big companies. And one of the things that he did, which is kind of simple and kind of complicated all at the same time, is he looked at what's called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. And that's a fancy name for what we all know, which is when you take a class, a week later, you've forgotten 90% of what you learned. If you don't use it, you lose it, right? That's the way of things.
Right.
And that's been known actually since, I think his name was Herman Ebbinghaus, came up with the curve in the 1800s. It's something we've known about for forever, but how do we do something about it? Well, the thing that Ebbinghaus discovered even in the 1800s was there's a fix for that. It's not a bug, it's a feature, because if our brains remembered everything that we do, we would go crazy. So the brain intentionally forgets things. So you can teach your brain to remember what's important by basically using it. And the way the brain knows if you're using it is if you have to meaningfully think about it. It's not just a matter of like, cramming for the test and relearning, you're rereading the same passages in the book. It's for your brain to actually think about and process the information. What Dr. Kahn came up with was a tool called Booster Learn, which he then sold a few years later. And what Booster Learn did and does is when you take a course, whether it's a classroom course or an e-learning course, it will start emailing the students, if they sign up for it, it's an option, on a scheduled basis after the course with questions about what you just learned. And if you think about, think about end user training for cybersecurity. I mean, this, I think for us in the IT world is kind of the biggest thing, right? Because I just found out last week that my stepfather got hit with ransomware. My brother, I didn't even know about it, but I mean, there's so much of that out there. And, we can do training for our clients, but they're not looking at this stuff every day like we are. We can teach them what ransomware is. We can teach them what phishing is. We can teach them what a phishing email looks like. 3 months later, they get an email from Microsoft, that has a link for them to click and download an invoice or whatever. And they'll forget the training, right? But if you have a system to ask them questions about what they learned, or to send them resources related to what they learned, maybe a little video, maybe a little handout or something like that, it helps to keep it fresh, and it helps it to stay top of mind when they need it. And that was a neat idea, and it's a neat tool. There's actually quite a lot of learning platforms out there, including ours, including Littmos, who have some kind of a booster function that works through email. And we at this time had started doing a good bit with Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is actually one of our top 3 selling courses right now. It's just taken off like wildfire in the corporate space. And so I looked at that and I said, well, I wonder if we could do something like that with Microsoft Teams. Because presumably, if you've got an organization that's using Microsoft Teams, all of their employees are going to be in Teams all day long, or the big Teams competitor is Slack. A lot of companies use Slack. And supposedly some companies use Facebook Messenger. I've never actually seen that, but Facebook tells me they do, so who am I to argue? Anyway, so we kind of took that idea of taking that memory booster and communicating it instead of through email, through a chatbot in those applications, and we came up with BrainBot. We did a couple things differently, and it also works through email too, but we built it on an artificial intelligence platform. So with Dr. Kahn's product, for example, he can ask really interesting questions, but he has to structure them as multiple choice because that's the only way that the system can understand them. We built ours on an AI platform, so it can ask text questions, and when you respond with a text answer right there in the chat bot, right there in Teams or in email or whatever, it can actually parse your answer to gauge your intent, and if it gauges your intent was correct, then it gives you positive feedback, and if it gauges your intent was incorrect, it'll give you constructive feedback. It'll correct them. So that's a very new thing for us, and now that it's built, it actually was approved in the Microsoft Teams App Store January 4th or something like that, so it's very new. It's in the Slack App Store and the Facebook App Store as well. Now that we've got it doing that, and that's a free add-on for our courses that we've written boosters for, which is mostly the email management, the time management, and some of those productivity apps, and also one of the Excel app courses. Now we're looking at, okay, how can we extend that further and actually deliver the training that way? Because, taking time out of your day to go to a different website to take a class is kind of a disruptive thing. You have to really want to do it to go there. But if I have a chatbot that pops up in my email inbox or in my Teams activity feed, once a day, once a week, whatever, and says, hey, here's your next lesson on, how to create a great presentation. Okay, I'll spend 5 or 10 minutes watching that and then wait for the next one to come the next day or whatever. So that's version 2 we're working on now. That should be out probably April.
And then you have to do it on 150 classes.
So I have a team of 4 people working on writing the boosters now for all the classes, and that's a lot harder than you might imagine.
I know. I try at the end of my chapters to, give, so here's 3 hot tips, or, here's some other things, or here's some key takeaways. And it's not always easy, even though I think my chapters are full of delightful and useful information.
Well, and the hard part is trying to tease out the important bits, right? Especially when you got so many to choose from.
Well, believe it or not, we're out of time. So how can folks get a hold of you?
If they are a MSP or IT consultant or CSP or whatever they're calling themselves these days, you can go to biggermsp.com and sign up. We've actually just changed our pricing, so it's always been free to sign up, but now MSPs, IT consultants, VARs, whatever, actually get a free license, so they can access all of our courses for free for one NFR user. And that's all built into the portal, but you can sign up there for free. It'll take a couple of days to approve the application, because we do actually, this program is only available for people in the IT channel. And so myself or Nancy Williams, our channel director, goes out and checks your website and makes sure you really are who you say you are. We do get a lot of like training companies and others that try to come in that program. We don't let them. But if you sign up at biggermsp.com, you'll get an email from Nancy, and you're off and running.
Very good. Well, thank you for being with us, and we'll have you back in a few months and see what else is new.
Great, girl. I appreciate it. Thanks.